anytime somebody comes up to me in a bar and says, "Hey, you that guy from TV?" My joke is always, that depends whether or not you like that guy from TV.
Right.
I'm Arizona Family Political Editor Dennis Welch.
Dennis, fake news Welch. Try to tell the truth.
And this is the Politics Unplugged podcast.
Dennis, if you have a problem with substance abuse, I am more than willing to talk to you anytime you need.
Welcome back to another edition of Politics Unplugged, the podcast. It's been a big week coming out of Washington, a lot to unpack. And so to help me understand what the hell just happened and what we've been going through over this past week and keep up, two great reporters from the Arizona Republic, Aron Hansen and Stephanie Murray. Thank you both for being here. You guys have been following this all week, so congratulations. You made it through the week.
One down. How many to go?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was a long 4 years this week.
That's right.
Today's only half over, so.
It was just brutal. A lot of information coming out of Washington. Hosts of a barrage of executive orders, and I guess big ticket. I was interpreting this as just basically Donald Trump taking his campaign promises and putting them into executive action out the gate to show his voters, his supporters, look, I'm following through on this. Now, a lot of this stuff is going to get litigated. Some of these EOs seem more like just pure rhetoric than actually having any real meaning. But let's start with your guys' take. What are the ones you guys were following most closely, the ones that impact us here more in Arizona? We'll start with you, Stephanie.
I mean, here in Arizona, it's all about immigration, and I think that's the right way to look at it, that Donald Trump took his campaign promises and basically signed them all into executive orders starting on Monday. If you listen to Donald Trump campaign speeches, none of this stuff really came as a surprise. And here in Arizona, he is reinstating stuff like his Remain in Mexico policy. He's declaring an emergency at the border to unlock more funding and send troops there. I think the most controversial of his immigration orders was that birthright citizenship, an attempt to get rid of it for kids of undocumented parents. That's already getting tied up in court. Arizona's got a big role in that lawsuit. So that's going to be the one that I'm watching probably the most closely over the next few months. And then just everything going on at the border. He's already authorized, I think, 1,500 troops to head to the border. What is that going to look like? We don't know.
Yeah, I've been talking to the governor's office. They told me this morning, we're tape on Fridays, like, we got no idea. We haven't had no communication from the White House on this. If we can do a little deeper into the birthright citizenship, Ron, I mean, this was immediately challenged by attorneys general across the country, Democratic attorneys general across the country, including right here in Arizona with Chris Mays. Now, they were successful, at least initially, in getting that order blocked, correct?
Right. And I think that this is one of the more contentious issues. I think there's broad public agreement that the border needs to be brought to a state of better control. And you're not going to find a lot of pushback on that. We've seen that with the Lake and Riley Act, the deals with criminal conduct or alleged criminal conduct and making people subject to deportations. That has also gotten broad Democratic support, or at least relatively broad bipartisan support at this point. When you talk about birthright citizenship, though, that starts to go in a very different direction, just the legal footing. Well, that it sits on a constitutional amendment. It feels like it's a fairly well settled legal point. So this is something that I think is by its nature going to draw a lot more pushback. It starts to break into pieces that Trump-led coalition of the public that has said we need to do something more about managing the immigration matters.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about the 14th Amendment. You said, legal precedent. We've got almost 150 years of legal precedent on this. Now, as far as Constitution goes, that clause in the 14th Amendment about birthrights is about as straightforward and as clear as you will get reading there's no ambiguity, in my opinion, on this. I mean, it's not like the Second Amendment, where everybody gets hung up or ignores a well-regulated militia kind of, stuff like that. There's nothing with that. What's the thought in your conversations reporting on this on how successful Donald Trump might be on getting his way on this?
Almost everyone I've spoken to has basically said, good luck. This is a really difficult thing to change. Amending the Constitution is a long, difficult process that would require a lot of people to agree. We're in a political climate where everything is polarized, and it's impossible to get a bill through Congress most of the time. But there's also kind of this other school of thought, and that I think Trump and his administration are relying on, is that, there is a legal argument to say that the 14th Amendment doesn't apply to everyone. And they're, kind of hoping to kick that up to the Supreme Court, where he has nominated quite a few of the justices. So it would be a huge, precedent changing event. I think it's still pretty, difficult to see it happening, but, who knows? They're definitely committed to pushing this as far as they can get it.
And I would just say on this that step back and minding the politics and the optics of it. Look how far the conversation has shifted in a decade. We are not talking about citizenship or a pathway to citizenship for illegal immigrants or those who are children of illegal immigrants and how to treat them and what is the expedited way to make that right. We have shifted all the way to a different posture, and I think that Donald Trump's supporters see that he is fighting for the things they care about and has shifted the conversation to really how far does the 14th Amendment reach, or other amendments if needed, to help bring about what they consider an urgent issue that helped win Trump another 4 years.
Yeah, and I've talked to some people who are concerned if eventually the high court takes this on and sides with Donald Trump, what happens next? What other amendments could be reinterpreted and sent back to the courts and things like that? But that's a discussion for another day. I don't want to get off too much on the topic. But if you could remind our listeners, too, the emergency at the border that he declared, what kind of powers, what kind of extra, what is that? What's the significance of doing that?
The significance there is that it unlocks more funding to accomplish his agenda at the border. It makes it easier to bring in more law enforcement. And what I'm going to be watching, I just find this so interesting. I've been talking to sheriffs who are on the border in Arizona, asking them, what is this going to look like? Are the Marines going to come in and work with you? Like, what do you expect will happen? And what they've said to me pretty overwhelmingly is that they think it's just going to be the National Guard, coming in and doing administrative work, like watching cameras or opening gates or things like that, and not actually doing the work of, arresting people or detaining them. But when you hear Trump talk about it, he's talking about bringing in, active duty military. They're already sending Marines. And so I think there's this disconnect, at least for what some of the sheriffs are saying publicly about what they think is going to happen versus what Trump is saying. And so I think that, that national emergency plays into that. It expands his power to handle things differently.
The funding there is always, you can say whatever you want, and you need the money to get that done. That actually helps him with that. But also to the Remain in Mexico, if you could remind our listeners too, what was that policy and what is that policy?
So that's a policy where if you're coming to the U.S. seeking asylum, instead of coming into the country, you would have to wait in Mexico for a time to come in. And so that's something that Trump is bringing back from his first term.
Yeah, and that changed under Biden. How many actions of Biden did he reverse? It was like 80-some actions, I believe.
I want to say 78 or 80, around that.
Give or take an action or two.
I lost track. I knew it was a lot, but yes.
And so when you reinstate the Remain in Mexico executive order, what's the net effect of that? Are we going to start seeing the big lines pile up at the border again? Is this something different about it this time?
One thing that I've noticed about the border debate in the last 10 years, I guess, is the way that it has shifted to asylum claims, the place where those discussions take place inside America after having attained a level of permission from the government and waiting for processing and such. this, I think, is the next iteration of it. Once again, it's a return to making sure that these cases are handled before someone crosses the border legally in the first place. It just puts people literally on a different footing, which I think is where Trump and the people who support him want this to be. They don't want these folks coming from wherever they have come from, which has also evolved quite a bit in the last few years, coming to America and making claims for asylum and triggering a process that is already overburdened, very slow. It's an unwieldy process. And, it's something that Congress tried to deal with last year with the bipartisan border security bill. They wanted to bring some resources to help try and manage and triage the traffic across the border in some ways. This is a different way of handling it. This is saying you're not welcome in the first place. And it is sort of keeping the problem at arm's length rather than having to deal with it when it's in your lap.
All right, and before we go on and start talking about some other orders, I do want to hit the Lake and Riley Act because this is border related. You brought that up just a few minutes ago. This basically allows for people here illegally to be deported for committing nonviolent crimes, like for thefts and things like that. Arizona Senator Ruben Gallego co-sponsored this bill, and he's a Democrat. He is taking a lot of heat for his sponsorship and support of this bill. Talk a little bit about that. What's going on there?
Well, you've seen it from some of the activist groups on the left in particular who have concerns about this, that it's one thing to vote for it, it's another to co-sponsor it. They view that as sort of elevating his adoption of a view that they obviously disagree with, but they now view as sort of emphatic support of. It's worth noting to me that Ruben Gallego voted for a similar bill a year ago when he was in the House. Mm-hmm. He has not just thrown in with the Trump administration across the board. For example, he has pushed back very vehemently on the birthright citizenship question this past week as just one example of it. He's also opposing Pete Hegseth to be the Secretary of Defense. So this is just one issue, I think, where after hearing a lot of voices on these kinds of issues over the past year plus on the campaign trail, I think Ruben Gallego has made the judgment that this is where public opinion is.
Yeah, and it's not a hard judgment if you look at the Secure the Border Act, and because he now represents an entire state and not just his left-leaning district in Congress. He's got to look at those results and kind of vote accordingly in some of this stuff.
That's right, and I think that there may be people who presume certain things about him because he is the first Latino elected senator in Arizona and such. But I think that is a gross oversimplification of what they think that even means, or where they think consensus lies on that within the Latino community, as if it's some monolithic entity. So it's the kind of thing that I think it's an interesting first insight into what Senator Gallego is going to be like, and it reflects, I think, a willingness to take issues one at a time, and he is not going to just reflexively say yes, no, fall into line, and just chase the Democratic majority's consensus view. To me, it's not a whole lot deeper than that, at least for now.
Yeah, and at least for now, too. I mean, it's the people I've seen a lot of comparisons. Like, oh, he's cinema again. I think you're a little bit too early for that. Again, I'll joke. When you start showing up with pink wigs, then you can start talking maybe about some of those comparisons. But until then, I think it's a lot different. I think it is significant that you point out, Aron, that he did vote for this a year ago. And he is going to stand up to Donald Trump on other issues with that. So we have to see how that all plays out before people start making judgments about how this is going to look for the next 6 years.
Yeah, and one other point with that is Mark Kelly, his seatmate, also is voting the same way on the same issue. So it's a point of disagreement, I think, among folks within the left.
Okay, let's get back to some of the executive orders. What is some stuff that you guys are watching that's not related to the border? I found his his EO on reducing the cost of living to be interesting, and I put that kind of in the rhetoric box. Like how can that be ordered? In that order, he claims that Biden's economic policies cost the average American $50,000 a year. I don't even know if the average American makes $50,000 a year. I don't know where he got that number. I've been trying to get that from the White House, but I found that to be a kind of an interesting in executive order when we start talking about putting his politics into executive order actions. I think that's one area where that works. What else are you guys watching?
Yeah, I think that one's kind of like a messaging executive order where he's saying we're working on it. But he's also said in the past few months, bringing down grocery prices probably won't happen right away. And he talked a lot on the campaign trail about how he was going to do that immediately. There are just factors that no president can really control when it comes to how much stuff costs at the grocery store. And then on the other hand, you have these tariffs that seem to be looming starting February 1st. Trump has said he wants to put a 25% tariff on Mexico and Canada, Mexico being Arizona's biggest trading partner. Millions and millions of dollars a year in stuff like tomatoes, grapes, peppers, grocery store items come through Mexico to Arizona and across the country, especially in the winter. So I think that's a really interesting one to watch. I also wonder if that will be the tariff he actually does put in place. Howard Lutnick, who is Trump's nominee to be the Commerce Secretary, he's said, Trump was speaking in kind of big, broad terms on the campaign trail, but, in practice, the tariffs will be more targeted and only on specific things. So that's kind of the thing that I'm looking out for, seeing that cost of living executive order. Here are the pieces that could actually impact it, and what are they going to do? February 1st is coming pretty quickly. We've almost made it through January. Yeah. It's still going on, but we're almost through to February. So I think that's like another big one to watch.
Well, the foreign minister from Mexico recently made a trip here, and they want to avoid all of this and try to work with this administration. I mean, what are the practical effects if you start hitting some of this stuff with tariffs coming from Mexico?
Look, Arizona has, I think, $20 billion worth of cross-border commerce with Mexico alone. Our second largest trading partner, I believe, is Canada, another country that is swept up in all of this. And by the way, if those tariffs are imposed, the NAFTA 2.0 that President Trump renegotiated in his first administration would be basically null and void. And so all of a sudden you have the at least theoretical possibility of tearing up all your trade relationships with Arizona's two biggest trade partners. We have a lot of different ties to those countries with business implications that have significant Arizona impact, and it's something that I'm curious in understanding better as to where we think all that will go. What we've seen in Ottawa and Mexico City, I think, is differing degrees of angst and sort of allowing President Trump to blow off some steam. But the real question, I think, is what will he actually do? And we're getting closer now to that point where we will see that this actually does mean something, or is it really just overblown rhetoric? And again, I think there's a lot of Arizonans who did not bargain for this. The Phoenix area at the height of the inflation crisis in the midst of the Biden administration, Phoenix was the highest metro area in the country for inflation for a time. And I think there is great sensitivity in the Phoenix area for what the cost of goods was. What you've seen with this executive order, I think, is in a sense sort of a bowing to the laws of gravity, as it were, in politics and economics. If there's any area in which you can find sort of bipartisan consensus in the economics field, as I understand it, it would be on tariffs. That this is almost uniformly viewed as very corrosive to your long-term interests, that it is something that will immediately be felt by consumers in a number of different ways that ricochet across the economy. And it seems like a really good way to undermine your own authority very early into your next administration. You're talking about executive actions and such. Another one that strikes me is just what we haven't seen on, for example, the conflict in Ukraine with the war with Russia. That was supposed to be settled before he even took office. We are seeing I think just the overall tenor of these executive actions is, in a sense, an acknowledgement that legislation can't really be the solution. That the margins that they have in the Senate, which are even larger than they have in the House, which is really hard to fathom, it just doesn't leave a lot of space to do actual substantive legislative solutions in order to accomplish their goals. So they're taking the approach of, doing what they can. They're very much making their base happy, but it may be that enjoy this week, because after that it gets much tougher.
Somebody was mentioning earlier, a lot of it can be looked as a messaging, like the EO on inflation. Well, I think a lot of this just put together, a lot of this is just a strong message. I mean, he talked about planting the flag in his inaugural speech about planting the flag on Mars. I thought on this week he has planted the flag in D.C. that he's back. And a lot of this does accomplish that. I mean, we've talked about, two of the big themes we saw in his EOs. We talked about immigration. We talked about the economy. And I think also he really steps into the culture wars here. And maybe we can wrap the conversation up here talking about some of that. You wrote about DEI training and how his executive order would get rid of that. First of all, just anybody who's any confusion, like what the hell is DEI training and what are we getting rid of?
Yeah, I mean, that was a day one order. His administration was talking about getting rid of any diversity, equity, and inclusion program in the government. A lot of programs that came into being under former President Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. And the Trump administration has gone as far as to, email government staff to ask them to point out, any DEI programs they haven't noticed that are still there. And those jobs, those roles are getting, eliminated really quickly. It's another thing that Trump campaigned on pretty heavily, wanting to get rid of DEI. It's something that conservatives have really rallied against in the past few years, saying that they want things to be, merit-based. Proponents of DEI say that, it corrects for a lot of discrimination and, things that have happened in the past and trying to balance things out. So I think it's going to be a really interesting one to watch. So far, they've really only gone for, what's under their control in the federal government. But the Trump administration has said that they are, to stay tuned on executive orders they might sign targeting DEI in private companies or discouraging the use of it. So that's one big one. The other is that Trump signed an executive order saying that there are only two sexes and actually asking the government to stop using the word gender entirely.
That was weird. I got to say, that was just strange to me. Like, I'm going to executive order, there's only two genders. Like, how does that, what's the impact? What's the implication? How does that work?
I think for the, in the short term as they implement it, basically what they were saying, a White House official did like a background call with the press, and they were saying basically whenever you have a government form, there won't be a long drop down anymore. It'll be male or female. And like on passports right now, you can choose male, female, or X. They would get rid of that. So it's like impacts like that kind of in when you're dealing with the government, and they would make it so you can't change it. They'd also make it, right now it's considered, I think it's under Title VII, if you refer to somebody by not their chosen pronouns repeatedly, it's considered workplace harassment. And what the order intends to do is to make that not workplace harassment anymore. And, it's something that Trump also talked about when he was campaigning all the time. It was something that would get, some of the biggest applause in his entire rally when he would talk about it. Like we were saying with these other orders, it's something that he's been talking about for a long time and that his base really wants to see.
Yeah, and Ron, real quick on the campaign stuff, too. You covered that race closely. I saw you out there at some of the Trump rallies and whatnot. Why does the culture war stuff get why did it get such a big applause? What is so amplifying and energizing about some of those messages? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know. I think that everybody likes to get involved and interested in politics, but they can only do it on levels maybe that they understand. And if you start talking too deeply about science or about healthcare policy or even taxation and such,
tax and tariffs,
it starts to get complicated. It gets messy. And when you have culture war issues, there's a simplicity to it. My God, this is how it ought to be, whatever it is. Fill in the blank. And I think that people sort of get wrapped up in that because it's what they can understand. It reaches them at a gut level. It also is something that I think they bring whatever necessary expertise they think is necessary for at least that issue field. And these things tend to get disproportionate attention. At the end of the day, I'm not sure if that's going to matter more than, for example, climate change mitigation. But I can tell you that's the one that's going to get the attention. It already is. We're doing it too.
Another one that I'm keeping an eye on too is the remote work order. Trump signed an executive order, telling government employees they can't work from home anymore.
We had a guest on the TV show who's like all amped about that. He's so excited about that. He's like, it's about time. They go, what have you been doing? I don't understand why they're so excited about that. But again, this is just telling federal workers to get back to the office, right?
Right. And I'm so curious how it's going to play out in Arizona, because I think when you think federal workers, you assume they're all in the DC, Maryland, Virginia, orbit. Yeah. But here in Arizona, we have around 34,000 federal employees. It's not clear to me, how many of them work from home right now and we'll have to go back to the office. But you kind of run into all sorts of situations with that where, what if somebody lives a few hours away, but their office is here in Phoenix? Will they move? Will they quit their job? Will this be, a situation where, people get called back to work and it's essentially a layoff without actually laying people off because they quit?
And in government, too, you also probably get into situations like, well, define office. I define office as my living room. I mean, that's where government gets, right? I mean, that is interesting.
Totally. So I'm so curious to see how it plays out and how many people will go back to the office. But, that was another one that I heard. I used to cover the Republican presidential race, the primary in Iowa, and that was a huge applause line for quite a few candidates when they would say, we're going to get federal employees out of their bathtubs and back into the office.
I think to Ron's point, it's just like, well, because I got to go to the office. Damn it, everybody else is going to go to the office.
And I think that this is, it feels to me like it may be a relic of the pandemic era. That to bring it all the way around, that the president is taking away the security detail for Dr. Fauci this week, that I think this is another way to own the libs on the pandemic, that to say that this is just another thing that is a leftover feature from that era that we want to be rid of. We want to X out literally every single part of that from our public lives.
All right, I think we'll wrap it up right there. But if you're familiar with the show, let's try to end with a non-political question. And I'd ask both of you guys, after reporting on heavy reporting days like this, when you go home, what band are you listening to or artist? Start with you, Stephanie.
Oh, that is an excellent question. Let me check. Let me see what I've got on my. I feel like I'm always picking something new. Let's see.
Because some days for me, I know I'm needing something pretty aggressive, or sometimes I need something really chill to chill me out.
Well, I will say this: this inauguration day was on the day that my alma mater played for and won the national championship. So I will say the music I was listening to was the best damn band in the land, the Ohio State Marching Band. Boom.
He's not aware of my deep hatred of the Ohio State Buckeyes.
Mine is always Phoenix native Stevie Nicks.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
Yes. Yeah. Always
driving
great.
through Phoenix, sun is setting, mountains look beautiful, some Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah, you can just kind of chill out and transport, get out of some of this, because some days it's like the mail; it just keeps coming. You know, it's just
exactly.
and nothing stops there. But I do have to say, man, as a kid who grew up in Iowa, hated Ohio State, and that's a compliment, sir.
I will take it,
because you guys were good. We'll end it right there. Thank you both for stopping by and spending some time with us here today. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having us.
Welcome back to the second half of the Unplugged podcast. Colinston's joining me, producer extraordinaire.
Always a pleasure.
Hell of a week, man.
Yeah.
Hell of a week.
Yeah, it was.
I thought we put weeks like this behind us with the elections gone, but the inauguration.
No, yeah. No, I think the election just sort of opted into this again.
Yeah, and it felt a lot like, I'm sorry, I don't think this is any kind of, it's disparaging at all, but a lot of the inauguration just seemed like a continuation of the campaign.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of the stuff. But let's start with you, man. What stood out for you this week?
Two things. One is it's just this return to, oh my God, we're doing this again, where every single day it's just another barrage of, he did what? And and every time Trump opens his mouth, all the news channels have to cover every second of it breathlessly. And we're in for another 4 years of wall to wall. What crazy thing is he doing now?
Yeah, and some of the stuff that he did, it's like he told you he was going to do this. Like what the F, man?
Yeah.
Like why are we why is some of these stations freaking out over this? Because he clearly said he was going to do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah. I think the concerning thing for me, at least, too, is, I mean, yeah, a lot of the stuff he said he was going to do, he's doing it, and that's getting a lot of the coverage. And so the coverage is missing out on things like, well, putting a freeze on everything at the National Institutes of Health. So while people might have voted for a crackdown on immigration, I don't know how many voted for a freeze on like cancer research.
Yeah,
which has also come along with this.
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff happening that I don't think people necessarily signed up for. But they also signed up for the chaos because that's what it was for 4 years last time around, and it's back.
Yeah.
And then, people spoke loudly that they wanted to return to that, so here we are. And
there's been a lot of talk. I believe they're called surge voters, as people come in late. They're not really the most politically active voter out there. They're not paying attention to political news. They're certainly not listening to our podcast. Yeah. And they come in these elections, and then they kind of disengage.
Yeah.
So, maybe they weren't clear or completely understood. Like, yeah. I mean, when you vote for Donald Trump, you are voting for the political chaos that comes with it. Yeah. It's part of his brand. I mean, and I think even supporters of him, most of them would probably admit that's the point, is that he's going to be the guy that comes in and shakes everything up. And he shakes everything up, whether it's good or bad or otherwise. That's up to the voters to decide.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Everybody's got their goddamn opinions, but
And the reality is you can only cover so much of it. So a lot of stuff is just falling by the wayside.
Yeah, it's, again, the phrase is back, flooding the zone. Just flooding the zone with all this stuff. I mean, that first day alone was like a dozen executive orders.
Yeah, I think it was more than that. I mean, just looking at the video with the piles of orders he has on his desk to do the little sign and.
Yeah, I mean, he puts on a show, man. I mean, he is a showman.
Yeah.
And he's brought that to politics, to his office. Yeah. And he knows what his people want, and he gives it to them. And again, we were talking about the EOs just a second ago with reporters from the Republic. I mean, it's what it was. Those EOs were just translating everything a lot of what he said in his campaign into executive action. Yeah. And people will think, that he has done something about this when a lot of this stuff is still up in the air. I mean, the birthright citizenship thing is a good metaphor for announcing for everything, for a lot of this other stuff he wants to do. It's going to be litigated in courts, in Congress and other places like that, and we'll wait and see.
Yeah, and again, the thing that was concerning to me is while we're all talking about birthright citizenship and stuff like that, what we're not talking about is, he also eliminated the executive order to reduce drug prices. Was the working man clamoring to pay more for their prescription drugs during the campaign? So we're living up to that one. I don't recall that.
It was a smaller niche group.
Yeah. And then the other standout thing for me this week was Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And the gesture that no one wants to call a Nazi salute.
Yeah.
And the degree of network coverage or national print coverage that was some sort of awkward, stiff-armed salute of some kind. What do you make of that?
Yeah.
And historically speaking, it's pretty clear what to make of it.
Yeah.
Like, you're really stretching if you're trying to turn it into anything other than what you saw.
Yeah.
I saw what I saw. Yeah. And people are circulating pictures of like Obama and other Democrats with their hands extended. Go look at the video.
Mm-hmm.
See how many of them are waving and got caught in a photo midway through a wave versus this, which was a pounding of the chest and extending of the hand.
Yeah.
When you see noted white nationalist Nick Fuentes online
Nick Fuentes was
doing the show, just cackling with delight at
And
how
he called it a Nazi salute.
yeah, and he was talking about how stunned he was, how brazen it was. Oh my God, he's doing the full-on Heil Hitler.
Yeah.
And loving it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I watched it live as it happened, and that was my initial thought. Like,
Yes.
oh my. I was like, oh, this is going to be, I remember thinking, oh, this is going to be a thing. And it was a thing.
Yeah.
And I was watching it. Was it CNN? Was the station I was on the TV on my desk, and the commentators afterwards were just like struggling to just like well, like that, they were trying to stay away from calling it a Sieg Heil.
Yeah.
Because it just happened. They're on live television. They're saying, well, it certainly resembled something that has a lot of historical significance.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things when you're in that live moment, you're like, I can't believe what I just saw.
Yeah.
And I would feel a lot more comfortable. And I know Elon has just made jokes about it and has responded to it. But I would have felt a lot more comfortable from him if he would just say, look, I was excited. By no means was that a Nazi salute. I didn't mean it to be perceived that way. No, definitely was not. I was not what I was intending to do. But he hasn't said that.
No, he hasn't. He said it's dirty tricks and they like to compare everyone to Hitler. Well, he also has a long history of praising anti-Semitic groups and amplifying anti-Semitic messages. And when he took over Twitter, one of the first things he did was all the anti-Semitic groups that were banned, he brought back on, specifically.
Yeah.
There are, he's essentially blamed the Jews for the California fires. Yeah. He doesn't have a track record that gives him a whole lot of leeway on this.
Well, and that's the thing. We had an expert in hate groups on the TV show, Matt Browning.
Yeah.
And that was the point he was making. Is like, you got to put this in context.
Yeah.
Like, if this guy didn't have this history of amplifying anti-Semitic crap on X and other things like that, then maybe, he's an awkward guy and made some awkward gesture. Maybe you give him the benefit of the doubt or something like that. But when you put it all in context, Matt Browning, again, he's a former Mesa police officer who spent 13 years undercover infiltrating hate groups and Nazi groups.
Yeah.
Who has said on this, like, I've seen thousands, if not tens of thousands of people of this, people doing that. So he called it a Nazi salute.
Yeah.
And when you wrap in the context, it makes it harder to say that it wasn't. And then you add in that there has been no definitive, clear, no, that was not coming from Elon Musk. It's hard to defend anything. And we didn't even get into what the German media won't even show his arm extended, in their coverage of that. They're writing a lot about that because that salute is illegal in Germany.
Yes.
And we, were reading an article in Der Zeit, one of the top news publications there, when the headline, when translated, was "A Hitler salute is a Hitler salute is a Hitler salute."
Yes.
They're not making any bones about it.
Yeah. No, they know what they saw. They're familiar with it. They know the danger of it.
Yeah.
And it was disappointing to see the number of outlets and groups making excuses. The ADL the ADL said, "Oh, he's awkward and he was excited." Come on, man. The ADL is doing that?
Yeah, they were the ones that, let's give everybody a benefit of the doubt. Again, put it in context.
Yes.
Like, put it in context.
Yeah.
With this guy.
It's astonishing. If it's some other person, some other Republican, if it's J.D. Vance doing it, give him the benefit of the doubt. He hasn't expressed this stuff before, and that seems out of character.
Yeah.
Elon Musk, he's...
And he can say all the other stuff he wants about dirty tricks, this, that, and the other thing. Okay, great. But just say it wasn't.
Yeah.
The clear was that I did not mean to do that. That was not blah, blah, blah. No. Disavow Nazism and Nazis and all that other stuff. And then say all that other stuff. But I haven't heard him make any effort to do that.
No, and then just started making jokes about it.
Yeah. Well,
I didn't find it that funny.
No, I did not either. I also thought this week, pretty interesting story. I thought, Attorney General Chris Mays getting involved, seeking to block Donald Trump's birthright citizenship order. I thought that was a pretty significant story this week. Chris Mays has basically been saying that since the election, that Trump may be wanting to do a lot of things, but he's going to have to come through us, the attorneys general, the Democratic attorneys general. And and it seems that she got success early on in the courts and the federal courts in Washington, who blocked that order.
Yeah.
So I found that was a big moment this week. I mean, and again, we're always looking at politics here. When you compare what Chris Mays is doing to Katie Hobbs goes out, and posts on social media. I think ironically she went on X that she thinks it's clearly unconstitutional. That's fine. But Chris Mays holds a big press conference and gets lots of headlines because she's taking action on this.
Yeah. This feels like one of those things you throw out there as president to give a little red meat to people that really isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, and with the current state of the courts, who knows?
Well,
if it goes to the Supreme Court, who knows what they're going to do?
And that's the fear, because if this does get to the get up to the high court, and they side with Donald Trump on this, what's next?
Yeah.
If
this goes his way, then all bets are off on anything going forward.
Yeah, I mean, are you basically saying? Are you saying then? Are you saying that a president should have the authority to line item veto the Constitution?
Yeah.
And I know that
seems like a bad idea.
That seems like a pretty terrible idea for any one person to have, regardless of political party.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want anybody to have that kind of authority.
Does the right want the left to have a line item veto on the Second Amendment?
Oh,
how'd that go over?
Oh, boy.
That seems like that might be problematic to the right.
Yeah. No, I mean, it seems like it would be very, very problematic.
Yeah. So, no, I don't. Who knows? I'm guessing it doesn't go anywhere, but we'll see.
It'll be interesting, man. It'll be interesting, man. A hell of a week again. Just a barrage of stuff. I was really happy to have the two reporters on, Ron and Stephanie, to come in and unpack some of that stuff, because the stuff again it's just like the mail, man. It didn't stop coming this week.
No. One after another.
Just one after another.
Every time I look up, there's another live picture of Trump sitting at his desk with some pile of stuff to sign. You got to laugh, man.
I mean, you gotta hand it to him on that. I mean, his understanding of media, like just the imaging alone.
Yeah.
I mean, people are looking at this. His vote supporters are like, look, he's getting to work.
Yeah.
That's what they want. You know, you gotta hand it to him. The guy knows how to do that.
There have been more than a few where I'm pretty sure he opened it up and saw what it was and went, "Oh, okay." I think there's a lot of stuff getting handed to him. I mean, clearly plenty he's pushed for and is important. Others, I'm not sure.
You know what else to round this out? Let's go ahead and round this out. Let's get both sides of this. We should probably mention the pardons that Biden put out before he left. Those are getting he pardoned his family members.
Yeah.
Before he's moved out, and that's getting widely criticized by a lot of folks. I mean, what do you think about that?
I mean, Trump has made no bones about wanting to go after everyone he doesn't like.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm Biden, I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah.
If you don't trust the incoming administration to be fair in who they target, and you're also leaving politics and you're 80-some years old, and you got one day left on the job, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a dicey one. I mean, you don't like the precedent setting and stuff like that, but everything is so abnormal now. You've got someone who just breaks precedent.
Yeah.
But I've seen some people use that as an excuse, like to make it, more legitimate that, Donald Trump pardoned 1,500 people for J6.
If someone wants to equate that to pardons for the guy with the Camp Auschwitz sweatshirt, or guys who admitted to attacking police.
Well,
You can do that.
and the fallout from that is, I mean, there are local police that are upset. I mean, here
Yeah.
in Arizona, I've talked to,
Yeah.
that have been that were upset about that.
Yeah.
Because the line that it was most of the people there were peaceful.
Those aren't the ones who got arrested by and large. Those aren't
No.
the ones you're pardoning.
No,
You have no need to pardon them if they were peaceful.
and some of these, I mean, these weren't like people doing, a year or two bit in the federal
No,
penitentiary.
you had a guy doing 22.
22 years.
Yeah.
There's another guy doing 18 years
Yeah.
for sedition and
Yes.
stuff like that. Crazy.
Yeah.
And what's the message on that moving forward, that it's okay to act like that?
Depending on who you support, yes. Yeah.
Anyway,
Should we go back to talking about the Jimmy Butler trade that hasn't happened yet?
I don't know. Can we self-impose can we self-censor? Can we impose a ban on talking about the Jimmy Butler trade?
Yeah, a moratorium until it goes
through or doesn't go
Yeah.
through.
And I've seen a few people say it probably happens by this weekend. So maybe by the time this drops.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Let's hope for it. If it
Yeah.
does happen this weekend, let me be the first to congratulate Jimmy Butler to the Valley.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't happen this week, man,
Good to have you around, Bradley.
good
Yeah.
to have you around,
Yeah.
Brad.
Yeah.
Now, let's go music again.
All right.
You brought up something kind of a standard, a classic question out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. My wife had an Uber type ride
Mhm.
earlier today, and said the driver asked her, okay, if you can see 3 musicians, artists, bands, whatever, living or dead
Mhm.
in concert, who would they be?
Okay. It'd be the Clash. And no, do not remind me that you saw them twice.
Twice.
I don't want to hear it. Don't want to hear it.
Twice.
Don't want to hear it.
Like the real Clash, the Mick Jones version. I actually saw the last Clash show with Mick Jones. Have I mentioned that before?
You've mentioned it.
I might have let that drop once or twice.
That's not a humble brag from you. It's what I
No.
love. You're just not
No,
humble
it's
bragging.
a brag.
This is straight up like,
Yeah.
Didn't you see it with the Hollywood Bowl or something like that?
I saw them. I saw them at the US Festival
Mhm.
in Southern California, where they headlined a show. They were the headline on New Wave Day,
Mhm.
where in addition to the Clash, it was the Clash, Men at Work, the Stray Cats, Oingo Boingo, the English Beat, Wall of Voodoo, Divinals, In Excess. Did I say Flock of Seagulls? And Flock of Seagulls.
Wall of Voodoo. I feel like this week we should end the show if we could with Mexican radio.
That was the last Wall of Voodoo show with Stan Ridgway as their singer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Final one.
That's a great show.
The other time I saw the Clash, they were opening for the Who at the LA Coliseum.
Oh boy.
The Clash, T-Bone Burnett, and the Who.
Clash opening for the Who.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that, but what a great show.
They did it. They
What a
did
great
it
show.
at Shea Stadium in New York, and they did it at the Coliseum and like 1 or 2 other places, I think.
What a great show.
It was pretty good.
What's the guitar player's name again? Pete Townsend. When the Who played the Super Bowl, it was my favorite prop bet. It's how many arm swings over or under. It was it's my favorite all time prop bet for a Super Bowl. I remember my buddy Brandon was getting ready to bet that. I'm like, you going to take the over or under? He's like, with Pete Townsend, always take the over.
Yeah. It's a solid bet. Take the over. Yeah.
And he blew past the over. Let's see here. So I got the Clash. I got the DC Hardcore Legends, Minor Threat. That would have been rad to see them back in the day. They broke up in 83, 84. Then I think it's a little dicey because then it's like there are 3 other bands I immediately thought of was The Jam.
Love The Jam. Just saw Paul Weller, the leader of The Jam, last year for the first time.
Who never comes to Phoenix.
He doesn't.
No,
Had to go to Anaheim to go see him.
Him and Bob Mould should get together and do a tour that doesn't come to Phoenix. That'd be easy to. That'd be easy to arrange.
Yeah.
So and then the three bands were like, it was the Jam, Tom Petty.
Yeah.
I never saw Tom Petty. It was always a big, and Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah. Seen Bruce. Saw Bruce on the Tunnel of Love tour at the Tacoma Dome.
The Tacoma Dome.
Tacoma Dome, where he remarked about how bad the city smells.
Oh, the Tacoma
Which it
Aroma?
does.
Tacoma
Tacoma
Aroma?
Aroma.
Yeah.
Man, last time I came through here, I got sick as a dog.
I'm surprised. Yeah, why'd you come back?
Well, it's a large building.
Yeah, it is a large
You're going to sell a lot of tickets to the
So,
Tacoma Dome.
and I probably told you I could have seen Bruce in New York.
Yeah.
I was in a hotel, Times Square. Anybody who's never been to New York, I do not recommend getting a hotel in Times Square.
No.
It's hard going anywhere, and it's really frustrating. But it was right next to where Bruce was playing on Broadway. Remember he was doing that bit on Broadway?
Yeah.
And there were tickets available, and we could have went, but I was there with a special lady friend I was dating, and she did not like Bruce Springsteen. So I was trying to be a good boyfriend. I'm like, okay, I won't force you to go. Because a Bruce show is like 2.5 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
It's a commitment. Even acoustic.
If you want
on
Bruce,
Broadway,
you're getting Bruce.
you're getting a lot of Bruce.
You're getting a lot of Bruce.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, I think the show I saw was well over 3 hours.
And I swear to God, like one of the first thoughts I had after we eventually broke up was, damn it, I should have went to go see Bruce.
Yes. Yeah, you probably should have.
So because I always wanted to say Tom Petty was always, and I had several opportunities to go see Tom Petty.
Yeah, he toured quite a bit.
And like there was always something came up, or I just didn't want to go do just whatever dumb reason. And and then he died unexpectedly, and it was just like it's a regret that I never got to go see Tom Petty.
Yeah, his early stuff is great.
Even the Losers was one of my favorite songs.
American Girl.
Yeah.
American Girl's about as good an American rock song as I've ever heard.
Yeah, it is. Unfortunately, got the scene in Silence of the Lambs tainted that song for many people. Because that scene and that song, it's like two icons meeting together.
Yeah.
Like, it's like every time you hear that song, you can't help but think of that, it playing in Silence of the Lamb right before she goes in the hole with the lotion.
It's sort of like Stuck in the Middle with You by Steelers Wheel. If you've seen Reservoir Dogs,
you can't
hear Stuck in the Middle with You. So my three, I think.
Okay.
Split Ends, old New Zealand new wave band.
Oh, that's a deep cut.
Yeah, fronted by Neil and Tim Finn.
Okay.
I've seen Neil solo. I've seen Crowded House, Neil's band, repeatedly. I saw Crowded House when it included Neil and Tim and Eddie Rayner, the keyboard player from Split Ends.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the drummer from Crowded House was the drummer for the very last iteration of Split Ends. But I never saw Split Ends, which is one of my absolute favorite bands. They get together for a reunion every once in a while. They broke up in like 84, 85, somewhere in there. And they'll do quick reunions, but it's usually like a tour of Australia. They don't,
So not Right Said Fred?
No, not Right Said Fred.
They're not one of your bands?
No.
Okay.
Number two, and this is slightly cheating, but the original lineup of The Who. I saw the version with Roger and Pete and John Entwistle and Kenny Jones on drums, not Keith Moon.
Ooh.
The original lineup with Keith Moon would have been kind of fantastic.
Keith Moon, legendary drummer.
Yes.
I mean, beyond like just a legendary rock and roller living the lifestyle, but like he truly was one of those, like drummers speak about him in hushed tones.
Yeah.
Oh, should have seen Keith Moon.
And, when I saw The Who, they were terrific, but it also had it was the feeling of a band that was sick of it, hated each other on their last legs and wanted to be done. They were still great, but like the younger, vital Who would have been kind of cool. And number three for me, I think the Smiths.
Ooh, nice one.
Yeah.
That is a nice one.
I've seen Morrissey solo back before he lost his mind and
Oh yeah, and
became
anybody
insufferable.
listen to this right now. If you ever think you want to go to a Morrissey show, do not buy the
Don't
ticket.
do it. Don't do it. Because among other things, you might go. Morrissey won't. And he's just turned into a gigantic asshole.
Yeah.
And I've seen Johnny Marr, the guitarist, who is absolutely brilliant, probably my favorite guitarist, terrific solo artist now. So I've seen, and Andy Rourke, their bass player, died a couple years ago. And Johnny Marr hates Morrissey's guts. So this is the reunion is not pending. Supposedly they were offered a huge amount of money to reform and tour, and Morrissey insists he said yes, but Marr said no, and Marr's like, I'm not getting on stage with him
unless you have been in pain. You just don't get it, man.
Yeah.
Like I get it. Like I get that.
Yeah.
Now how about the X amount of millions? No, we're good.
Not doing it.
Not good.
Doing it. I mean, Johnny's outspoken about Morrissey's political views, but beyond that, he just doesn't want to have anything to do with him.
No, I get it, man. I get it. I get it. You know, from what I've seen from Morrissey, man, I can't imagine what it's like working in a band.
Oh God, no. And just the number. For those who don't know, he's constantly announcing tours, playing one show, and then canceling the rest, and going online with some, something that reads like it was written by a Bronte sister, talking about, oh, woe, the ills we have acquired upon this tour, and sadly, again, I must reject the.
Like, what century are you touring in?
Yeah. And basically, he'll set up a West Coast tour that'll start in L.A., and he'll play the L.A. show and blow off all the others. Or, and this was cute, the last time or recently, he was announcing shows, and he had some West Coast tour. And the L.A. shows were like at the Pond of Anaheim, whatever the hell they call it now. And again, somewhere in L.A. that was like the Crypto Center. So he was playing arenas. He's not an arena act.
Yeah.
He announced the shows and then had to announce that due to circumstances beyond his control, and I don't know if he had the consumption or what, but he would be unable to make these shows, and they were canceled. And all evidence suggested that he had sold a few hundred tickets to a place that held, 18,000 seats.
Dear Lord, man.
He doesn't show up. I saw him once before I was familiar with his solo stees.
Mm-hmm.
He was fine. He plays like an hour, but it was good. It was a good show. He played the Celebrity Theater. And then a few years later, he was coming back, and I got tickets. He was like at the Orpheum or something.
Yeah.
And literally the show got postponed and rescheduled like 3 or 4 times before they finally just canceled it. That's what he does. He doesn't show, and he reschedules, and he doesn't show.
That's his deal, right? That's his shtick, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, look, he doesn't show. Perfect.
Yeah.
It was the quintessential show.
And then he'll blame it on ill health or cheeseburgers or something.
Oh, yeah, literally. He canceled one show, got on stage. He wouldn't go on stage because he claimed he could smell meat being cooked.
Yeah. There was a show
he was playing a fair.
Yeah.
And surprise, surprise.
He did a show where he walked off after a song and a half because he said it was cold.
Well, can't be uncomfortable. I'm feeling chilly.
Yeah. So anyway,
if
I could have seen the Smiths back in the day, that would have been fairly fabulous.
That would have been
not
fucking awesome.
Pay a dime to see Morrissey now.
Yeah.
But and you mentioned the Jam. The Jam would have been phenomenal.
Would be, yeah. I mean, now it always opens up like, I'm thinking just all these other bands and acts. I would have loved to have seen Johnny Thunders.
Yeah.
He was New York Dolls, had a pretty interesting solo career. Bands like Operation Ivy, things like that. But yeah, like
I've been pretty lucky in that the legends that it would really mean a lot to me, I actually got to see. I saw Bowie. I saw Prince. I saw the Kinks.
Prince I would put up there too. He'd be in my if there was a top 10, Prince would be in my top 10.
Yeah.
That guy
was pretty great. It was a pretty good show.
It
was after Purple Rain, before the follow-up album was Around the World in a Day.
Yeah.
And it was before that came out, but he was playing a lot of the songs from it. It was a terrific show.
Well, real quick, I do want to kind of wrap on this. I want to tell you like 3 acts I would never see, even if he paid me. And
right.
I'm going to go with Cream, the Yardbirds, and Eric Clapton.
Not Derek and the Dominoes? How about Blind Faith?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't go see
Make it a
Derek
top
and the
five.
Dominoes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you there. Yeah, we can't be doing a music discussion without bringing it back around to Slam and Clapton somewhere.
We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. I still can't get over the fact that he didn't even finish writing Tears in Heaven.
Yeah. Hey, can you finish this?
Can
It's about my kid. Make it sad.
make it sad? What happened? He fell out of a window. I'm pretty broken up about it. Can you finish it? Can you finish
Can
writing?
you express how sad I am? Thanks.
Thanks.
I'll be at the bar. Yeah.
I'll be at the bar complaining about immigrants.
Feels like a good spot to wrap it up.
Good night.
We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. You can subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, the Google Store, or anywhere else you get your podcasts. See you next time.